Hello and welcome to Crafting Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I am your host. Every Wednesday and Friday, I'm bringing you interviews of makers of all kinds from all over the world, female and non-binary makers of all kinds. Today's guest is Katie Thompson of Women of Woodworking. Now, I've had Katie on here before as a guest, and I've also been a guest on her Instagram live series over at Women of Woodworking. And today we have a very fun and exciting announcement that we make during our chat together. So I'm not going to give any more of it away than that. You're just going to have to keep listening. Before, though, we get into that conversation with Katie, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Lee at Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin Lefty's Workshop or Woodshop. Sorry, Kevin. Christy Twisted Twine, Jeremy Spees, Sammy Go Sammy Lee, Rachel Moody Makes, Bonnie, Toolmom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued and ongoing support, helping us to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. And with no further ado, we're going to head on into the conversation with Katie. Well, I know you've been on before, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself again, even though you've been on before.
Well, thanks for having me again. I'm Katie Thompson. I am an artist, writer, and advocate, just to, I guess, give the total umbrella there. But more specifically, I am the creator of the Women of Woodworking project, as well as Pen and Chisel, excuse me, which is a new digital monthly journal for woodworkers, artists, and makers. So yes, and I live outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And so this is me coming live from my porch on finally a day it's okay to exist outside down here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I was talking to my wife about talking with you again, and she's like, where is she located? I'm like, I don't know, one of the Carolinas, south, north, somewhere over there. So maybe one of these days I'll remember that it's South Carolina. But so I guess we'll chat a bit about why you're back on the podcast, besides just, being fun to chat with, but having you back on because you've been doing for a while now, you've been doing Instagram lives over on your Women of Woodworking page on Instagram, and I have gotten to a point where producing 2 episodes a week gets a little bit cumbersome sometimes. And so I thought, hey, there's somebody basically doing the same thing that I'm doing. So why don't I reach out and see if there's a potential for collaboration? And so really, this is kind of the announcement that at least, starting soon-ish, you'll be coming on and doing and hosting, an episode or maybe 2 a month to help help expand my bandwidth, and also to maybe get your content out to a broader audience as well. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about like Women of Woodworking, how that started, and like why you transitioned into doing lives.
Absolutely. When I started Women of Woodworking, I had to go back and look. I actually started the project in the end of 2014, published my first interview 2015. It was just a series of interviews on my blog. I was freelance writing and working with my husband in our business, designing and building custom furniture. And I knew with some health issues and kind of our plans for our family coming up, I needed to transition to more writing. And I wanted to write about woodworking. I wanted to write about what women were doing. I wanted to write about my experiences being a woman, woodworker, historically underrepresented voice in the craft. And it's really just grown from there. Over the years, I've, had to pause it here and there. But really it was the pandemic that finally gave me, enough time to devote to it like I wanted to. It was always kind of a passion project. And I, started, I think in April of 2020, just hopping on once a week, doing live streams, goofing off. The first one, my sweet friend Mary May dropped in, and it was I think that was my like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock show. It was really late and we were both, I could tell, really tired, and I was like, all right, I've got something here, but it needs a little bit of tweaking. So and it's just turned into, I think it's probably 50 plus interviews at this point. But the weekly live stream was just so much fun. It was a great way to connect with women and gender nonconforming woodworkers from around the world, and met so many amazing craftspeople. But the entire time, I've been very cognizant that I am using, an Instagram, Facebook platform. It's not without its pitfalls. While it does make the interviews and content so much more accessible and adds, a very interactive element to it sometimes. Very recently, of course, I'm sure we're all remembering the Instagram, Facebook outage, and it just really reminded me of how important it is. One of my dear friends, who is a content creator, just said, this is how, you need to invest in yourself. And this project means a lot to me. And so do the interviews and the amount of time and effort that all of these makers spend to make this project possible. It has been a completely volunteer project. I didn't even start selling merch until last year. So this has all been done kind of on the generosity of spirit of the community. And I've just had enough time on Instagram to know that it's a good time to switch over. And what better way to get into the podcast interview world than with you. I think we probably spoke about a year ago, and I think we had to cut ourselves off. We were having a little too much fun there. So
I was gonna say I meant to look it up before we were chatting, to kind of scroll through and see what episode you had been. But I do recall, I believe you were on when it was still Maker Mom.
Yeah, I think so.
Even before it changed to Wonder Women. So that would put you probably, oh gosh, I don't know. It might be over a year.
It might be at this point.
Yeah. The problem with this whole thing, pandemic thing, is it creates a weird timeline in your head.
The never-ending day in March. I joked on Twitter the other day, it feels like that Russian doll show on Netflix.
Yeah.
That series, it feels like a never-ending in real life version of that, and we're all stuck together.
Yes, exactly. But I do believe it was during the pandemic, because I think we talked about kids being home and how much fun that was and is to navigate. I know yours are still home. Mine luckily are not. I found you. You were episode 91.
Oh, nice.
Just for reference, I just released today episode 205. So
wow.
No, I mean, granted, you're episode 91, and that's right around when I started adding the second. So it's not like it's been, whatever that is, 100 something weeks. It's been, 50 weeks, but still about a year. We were close.
Yeah, that's 50 very busy weeks.
Yes. And I know we did talk in that episode about kind of, where your passion came from for the representation of women, specifically in the woodworking craft. I guess, as this podcast, though, I will say, features quite a few woodworkers, just because it's a lot easier for me to find woodworkers sometimes than makers of other kinds. But I do try to reach as many, I guess, crafts and such as possible, and finding places like welding and fabrication is even more underrepresented than woodworking. So I guess, especially now that you've taken up pen and chisel, like, what's been your, I guess, experience continuing to try to find more women to interview and feature, and maybe touching some other spaces that maybe fall outside of woodworking?
Absolutely. So yes, this time, or when we spoke, pen and chisel wasn't even, it wasn't even a thing yet. So in the past year, because the Women of Woodworking project has just grown in momentum, and have had so many folks, when I do an open call, reach out to do some sort of interview, whether it was, written, some people didn't want to do the live interviews. That was another thing, is a lot of pressure for someone, me, whatever, I'll hop on and talk about the weather. I don't care, but not everybody is as comfortable as I am. So, being able to still offer recorded video interviews or a written interview, people are very busy. So not everybody has time to sit down and spend an hour with me, but they do have 15 minutes to give me some thoughtful answers to, 5 questions.
Right.
So it's, I needed a platform, and I have, done guest, contributor articles, at Popular Woodworking.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if I've written one for furniture and cabinet making, or if I was just featured in it. But I needed a solid home for all this content, and having also, met Camille of Remodel Your Life, and speaking with her and all of her expertise, eventually Pen and Chisel, was born. I knew in the long run, I wanted Women of Woodworking to grow into something that would maybe, kind of outlive me, whether that be a scholarship program or, something like that. I would absolutely love that. But I also knew how hard it would be to start a nonprofit from scratch. And also I love to write. I love to interview. That's my strength. So I got the idea to do a monthly, paid digital journal. So now that's the home of all of, original Women of Woodworking content. I have, guest contributors, guest features, but it has also allowed me to really open up the, well of stories and information that are out there. I'm not limited to, Women of Woodworking. It absolutely, whenever I started it, I had no idea, the size of the community and how far that extended beyond just women identifying people, So as much as I love that project, it did feel like there were certain constraints to it that, I needed to expand and wanted to expand a little bit and be more inclusive and find a way to share more stories and different kinds of craft, because you're right. For folks to think how underrepresented, women and gender nonconforming craftspeople are in woodworking, it's an even smaller pool, in blacksmith or stained glass, or even things like metal engraving, these really specific niche techniques. So, women aren't the only underrepresented identities here. There's, a wide spectrum, and we come in all shapes, sizes, colors, representations. I didn't see it out there that made me feel, it wasn't out there. And so why the heck not just start doing my own thing? But opened up a platform to speak with a more diverse group of makers and artists, and also allowed me to publish a lot more content a month and do it in a meaningful way. I felt like I needed to have a more formal platform to share these stories because it was really important to me. So Pen and Chisel started, and it's just $5 a month or $49.99 a year. Mm-hmm. And we've already done one sponsored class over the summer at Charleston Woodworking School with Abby Mechanic. So that's the other thing, is now there is a financial element to the project that will allow me to actually generate scholarships and give mm-hmm. back, try to create a fund or just some sort of opportunities for other folks to be able to get into craft. Whatever that may be, will it be a Women of Woodworking scholarship, or will it be kind of like a more general pen and chisel? We will see. But once again, the community has just been so wonderful in supporting it, being involved in it. I mean, the guest features that I've gotten have just been amazing. And the amount of time and generosity that people have spent, really reading and providing feedback or suggesting guests, it's very interesting, and I'm excited that we're pivoting to work together now, because sometimes I put a call out there and I'm completely inundated, and that's just so wonderful. But then, there are times you want to go kind of searching, you want to find those things that really move you too. So I'm excited for us to work together, because I've always been so impressed by the diversity of guests that you're able to find, and just how amazing some of these craftspeople are and the different things that they can do. So I'm really excited to be able to bring that part of our community into what Pen and Chisel and Women of Woodworking are already doing. And also, growing into this diverse community that you've already built as well, which is mm-hmm. is so amazing. And I hope that people will see this partnership as like a true representation of, the community spirit that we feel and love, and really try to cultivate with the work that we do. Mm-hmm. It really is about building community and sharing these stories. So I'm really excited.
Hey makers. So today's podcast episode is sponsored in part by Alicia Van Osdal, who is the owner of Basil Blue Design Company. Alicia is a maker of all things, really. Her focus is on beautiful craftsmanship through woodworking, repurposing, refinishing, art, and sculpture. Her background includes 30 years of graphic design, logos, and branding. If you have an idea or concept and need a creative solution or graphic design, you can email Alicia directly at Alicia, and that is ALICIA @basilblue.com. Or you can visit her website at www.basilblue.com. And fun fact, Alicia actually designed the logo for Crafting Revolution. So that is an example of the impeccable work you can expect if that is something you are in the market for. So be sure to look up Alicia again at her website, basilblue.com. All right, let's get back into the action.
For what's ahead.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited too. Sorry, I'm being interrupted by a cat.
Oh, fair enough.
He's coming in to go, why is my window not open in the other room? But yeah, I'm definitely excited. I do want to ask, and I don't think I asked this the first time, I know your background is writer and woodworking. Do you feel like you have a passion for one over the other? Or do you feel like they both kind of feed that same energy?
Yeah, that's a great question, because they've meant different things to me at different points in my life. Like I've always been a writer, but there was definitely a time in my adolescence, and especially when I was in college, I was like, I am not writing for fun. I am not, like I've got a 12-page research paper due tomorrow. Right. I still haven't written, like that type of thing. And that was when I did kind of turn to more, visual arts, making, using my hands. And I feel like woodworking kind of found me. It was something that, my dad has always done as a hobby, and I thought would be really cool. I had an appreciation for, but it wasn't something that like I sought out. And then of course, working with my husband and our relationship, it was really kind of this like surprise, and especially looking back on it, I'm so grateful for that time of being able to work under him and learn and make mistakes. I say, make bad art, just figure out who I am. And while I love woodworking, I feel like my relationship with it, it's been forced to change because of health issues. And at the same time, I feel like it's brought me back to, okay, like I love woodworking and I have this appreciation for it, but I also have this talent for writing and sharing stories. And I think it's just knowing what my strengths are. I knew when I got into woodworking, I love designing and I love, problem solving. I love seeing clients interact with pieces, putting something very special in specific, made especially for someone in their home or a space that's really important to them. That's another way that I feel like I can engage people's stories more directly. That being said, I'm clearly meant to be a writer and a storyteller in some capacity. So, and I've really just been doing what works, like I said, even just the live streams, I was just hopping on there kind of saying, hey, here's what's happening. And it's just, the community has also been very great in providing feedback. And if you listen, they've engaged, yes. So, I would say I probably connect more with writing, and while I'll always have a very special connection with woodworking, I've also been the type of person to be very interested in everything. So I've, taken a welding course. I love to learn more about glass blowing. I'd love, I want to learn about everything. So I also knew that, spending that time with my husband, it was amazing to get an intensive and get a feel for how dedicated some of us are to our material and our particular craft. I also knew though that wasn't going to be my end all. So I'm glad that I've trusted the process. I wish I could go back and tell myself, at that time, because I felt that it wasn't going to be my end all, but I was like, I do feel very passionate about this. I have dedicated all this time. Why am I not getting this fulfillment that I feel like I'm seeking? And it was, I wish that I had just like, calm down, it'll work out, and it's shifted on its own. And it's been really neat to be a part of, and to look back, but it also makes me really excited because it's like, wow, I feel like I did a lot of this stuff kind of just winging it, like just following what felt right, what I enjoyed doing. And now it's like, I have intention behind what I'm doing. I have intention behind the stories that I share and the people that I reach out to. And it's been lovely to see what has come to me. I feel like in return, putting that energy out there and having the audience and participants pick up on that. I've been blown away by the stories that people will come on and share with me, how personal they are, allowing themselves to be vulnerable. And I mean, some of these makers and artists, I don't see their faces until they come on to these interviews. Like I may not have the slightest clue of what they look like because they're so focused on their work, that's how they present themselves. And what an honor it is for me to even be able to have that conversation with them face to face. I just love what I do.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Like, and it's interesting. I've had, quite a few guests the podcast, as they share their kind of story or journey with me, will talk about actually writing being maybe their first love of creating. And I would say that resonates with me. Like, I've always been a designer, and like I've always liked more of the physical building, even as a child, but I kind of got maybe pushed to focus creativity in more of a writing sense. And so I was pretty passionate about writing, like as a preteen and teenager and stuff like that. And then it kind of felt like, I don't know, I think I judged myself of like, well, if I'm not one of the greats, then why am I like taking time to like write stuff down? And I kind of found,
I can tell you're a writer just based on that statement alone.
But then I found, kind of back into like physical making, woodworking and stuff. And so I would definitely say like I still have a big passion for that. But I guess I didn't realize how much I appreciate the power and importance of story until I started the podcast. Like, and again, and I've recently started writing again, just like for my own, personal well-being and stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like, I actually do enjoy this. And I enjoy that it could be a medium to maybe reach another level of audience, and to be able to share things in a different way. Because I'm also one of those weird people who can take a really long time to formulate a thought. And writing allows you to take all the time you want to formulate that thought. There's not somebody on the other end like, come on, spit it out. Exactly. There's not any timekeeping to writing. So I appreciate that aspect as well. But yeah, I didn't know I loved story as much as I do now know, just through the podcast, and like totally fascinated about learning about other people. That's why it's kind of funny. It's like most of my podcast interviews spend very little time actually talking about making. Most of it's about like the story of them. I want to just know about them, and yes, making plays a part of that, but we don't spend time talking about like, well, how do you do a dovetail, or like what's your technical, what's your technique for this? We don't talk about that stuff, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad you said that, because that was, I think, what kind of turned me off from writing for a little while. Was I loved writing, but I really loved story. I loved storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I remember I was my first like newspaper job. I wrote for the two little local newspapers in my small town, doing sports writing, and I just remember being like, and then majored in communications in college and took a writing for the mass media course. And it was amazing and taught me so much, but it also taught me that's not for me, like what it was really going to be. And you're right, like story is definitely what has just captivated me over time. And writing is just, gosh, it's such a beautiful way to express these stories and these feelings, and just, but also I think it allows us to highlight the importance of sharing these stories and the impact that we may not be talking, about how-tos, but
yeah,
there's definitely not enough discussion, about culture, in our craft and in our workshops, and in inclusivity, and all of these topics that shape, very profoundly the way that we make, the way that we go about making, the way we network and grow within our own woodworking or craft communities. those conversations are very important and very powerful. And I've always kind of said, there's a lot of great folks out there doing how-tos that know what they're talking about and are doing it well. And I'm happy to amplify those as much as possible. But I also, again, like kind of knowing my strengths, I feel like the conversations that aren't being discussed in kind of traditional mainstream woodworking media, so to speak, still need to happen. And that's where I come in and we come in.
Yeah.
And also just, again, seeing what the community has asked for and needed. It's just been amazing to the people that have like reached out to, hey, I want to nominate so-and-so or share this person or whatever. Especially in this day and age, it can be really easy to feel isolated or, even be isolated in your own self, your identity and craft. And I joke that I probably have like the most inclusive experience in woodworking than anybody. I work with other women and, non-binary craftspeople all day long. Like that is my culture. But I hear from enough of the people that I interview and the stories that, this interaction is it for them. There isn't another women woodworker in their town. There's not, a non-binary craftsperson or instructor or even policy, at the school that they attend. I think there's a lot of us out there that, we want to woodwork and we want to create these spaces that we all feel comfortable in and are really our own. But there's a lot of work to still be done. And I feel like this is part of it. And I'm really encouraged, especially by organizations and things that have supported the mission of Pen and Chisel, have sponsored, have reached out and, put their name down on it and say, yeah, like this is what we're about. And I feel the momentum, it has certainly grown over the years and I'm very encouraged by it, but that makes it all more important to not stop right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I spend a lot of time, chatting with people on the podcast about this idea of making our own space, because to your point, like there are like actually where I live, there's quite a few artists and quite a few craftspeople. However, there's not really a good like organization that brings us all together type thing, right? And so even though I am aware of it, I don't necessarily like intentionally go to interact with it because I also know, I guess the dynamics still haven't changed in those spaces. And so I look, that's why I talk about like, sometimes I'll have people on, maybe it's another queer maker who's like, well, in my shop, I only hire, people of color or people from the queer community. And maybe that's wrong of me. And I usually stop them and say, but it's fair for you to create a space that you feel safe in and that you want to create a space that others who are marginalized feel safe in. I think that's the drive, at least personally, so much about the idea of wanting to work for myself, because even outside of the world of craft, it's like every time looking, going into a new workspace, it's like I have to do the assessment of, am I safe in this space to be myself? And that just gets tiring. That just gets exhausting, time after time. And I would say same for yourself, in the sense of, I don't know how much you feel comfortable sharing about, your kind of health concerns and, maybe kind of ableism that you encounter. out in the world, and like how that also affects you going into spaces?
Absolutely. And that's another thing is like through this project is, it's taught me that there are so many experiences that, are similar to what I've experienced, as a woman identifying person, but I could never fully understand. And, you expressing that kind of safety check that you do walking into a room. I mean, I've heard so many Black women woodworkers say the same thing, and I've, other, women of color and non-binary craftspeople, whether it's, your identity as a queer person, whether it's your race, it's hard for people that aren't faced with those barriers every day to understand how something as simple as you said, describing walking into a room. I mean, that's work. That's a lot of emotional work. That's so much added on to what should be a relatively straightforward, simple experience. Going into the workshop, doing work. That's heavy. That's really heavy. So this project constantly reminds me to stay humble and always learning and listening, and that's one thing I really would like to drive home to people that listen or follow and support the project, is how important it is to really listen to people whenever they describe these experiences and believe people. It's interesting. I had a spinal cord injury and infection when I was 18. And so it's been about 16 years since then. And I've been able to do different things at different points in my life. When I was younger, I tend to recover from my surgeries better. I didn't need a walking, aid all the time. I was able to get by, with kind of hiding my invisible illness, my invisible disability. And part of that, I really was figuring out what was going on with me. Things were changing. How did it impact my life? Did I want to be open about it? I knew that there was going to be some level of advocacy eventually, after I got injured and sick, but I kind of needed time to process, how I truly felt and what I wanted to say. One wonderful thing with the Women of Woodworking project is that's one of the most uninteresting things about me. Like, nobody cares that I'm not a woodworker in a traditional sense. It's like nobody cares that I can't lift a board or can build these huge things or whatever. I feel really valued and supported and seen for who I am by this community. As a writer, as a maker, having to create my own contribution to craft and doing that, and it's just been so beautiful to have people I greatly admire, support and subscribe and, come, be a panelist on, an event and share their time and talents. And that is one really beautiful thing. But, the whole reason I started the Women of Woodworking project was because I got tired of going to shows and exhibitions and my name being on the sign or my name being on the wall. And people coming up and saying, so do you help your husband? Do you cook him dinner? That sort of thing, and having to constantly, affirm my position, in our shop, in our business. And I got real tired of it. It is exhausting. You described it perfectly. It's fucking exhausting. Sorry. There's, unfortunately, it's not a unique experience, and I find, as far as ableism in the shop, I haven't experienced a whole lot of that, I don't know if I just haven't spent enough time kind of out as a kind of openly disabled person, or if it matters, I teach marketing at the Charleston Woodworking School, and I come in there all the time, or I used to, at least whenever it was open, and, you know, with my cane and walk around and talk to students and look at things and give feedback and hang out. And it was just never an issue. It was never like, oh, you know, like, and I never got crap for it. Now, that being said, I was also being protected by, you know, Sam and Joseph, you know, the instructors there that are, you know, white, cis, you know, males. Like, you know, I'm being married to Joseph is, you know, I think that automatically just like puts a level of like courtesy or respect that students and things like that give me, because yeah, people are less likely to show their behinds, I found, if he's around. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm really excited for the world to open back up and go to things like craft shows and exhibitions, not as an exhibitor, because talk about exhausting. So I'm excited about that, but like, you know, to be out and to show my disability in the woodworking community, because another thing is, since I've been open, you know, so many have, you know, craftspeople have come to me and said, I got into woodworking because you know, I had a learning disability, or, you know, I've always had a challenge with this, or I too have a chronic illness. And it just means a lot. You know, most of those private messages, you know, they're just, you know, nobody will ever see. And that's the point, is like the work that we do truly does reach people that, you know, we'll never hear from, that you know, don't feel comfortable reaching out, but really do gain something from, you know, the interviews that we're doing and the stories that we're sharing, the work that we're doing. And that's what it's about. It's about, you know, it's about those moments. It's about, you know, every listener getting just one little thing out of it that, you know, might make them feel more included or think about things differently, you know, the next time they go into a shop. You know, I hope everyone that listens to this, that is an educator, you know, or an instructor, you know, really does try to be intentional about creating a safe space. You know, if you want to truly create an inclusive space, you know, we have to do the work. You know, it's beyond just talk. I love to talk. I will talk all day long, but y'all are doing the actual work. So yeah, I'll just nag everyone. And I'll nag everyone until morale improves.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag Woodworker on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action. Yeah, I just had an episode. Yes, the beatings will continue until morale improves. I just had on, and I think you had her on one of your lives too, Tamara Katz of Woodworker Rehab. And we were talking because she was saying like the biggest feedback she actually gets from schools is, you know, because she's trying to integrate her program within woodworking programs. The biggest feedback she gets is they're struggling to bring in diversity. And I said something to the fact of, you know, if you would just hire an instructor who's not a white cis male, that starts signaling that you're providing an okay space for people who are not white cis males to come participate in classes. You know, and she kind of chuckled at that, but it's like, to me, it seems like completely obvious. But that's not where the routes seem to be going. There's some programs that are better than others, for sure.
Sure.
You know, that are really striving to do that. But it's like, go find a queer Black woman teacher, and there you go. It says so much about where your intention really lies.
That's a perfect example of, all right, you really do have to be intentional about it. You can't just talk about it. And hiring diverse teachers, you're right, instructors is a great place to start. I've really admired the work that Aspen Golan is doing with the Chairmaker's Toolbox. And I think I quote her in every interview. She's amazing. But, we've talked about, the importance of schools and even employers having a diversity and inclusion statement. It might seem just like a bunch of words to people that, they're like, all right, I already feel represented. I feel included. Yeah. But to see those words said, those do matter, that does matter to people. And she also had a great point of, if institutions and organizations are, part of the work is, yes, having a statement, but also, following up on that as well. And whether the instructor is identifies as a marginalized identity, or if they are, a white cis male, everyone, needs to be prepared for what their students might be, being prepared to provide a safe space for everyone, regardless of who they are or how they identify. That would be a great place for folks to start. And that's like you said, it seems like an obvious thing, and to me and you, like, the work we do clearly shows that we have a very, very diverse, woodworking and craft community. It's again, being intentional about who you reach out to, being intentional about being diverse and inclusive. I also wanted to say how impressed I am and appreciative I am of other organizations on Instagram specifically. So before my live streams, I like to do kind of like a description of what I look like, a visual description for visually impaired viewers. And I just can't tell you how many viewers have gotten in touch with me and said how much they appreciated that. But then also putting photo descriptions in, the captions or comments. Sorry, there's my dogs. But I've seen so many other folks, after they reach out to me, start doing it themselves. So starting to adopt these small behaviors, just putting a few extra sentences in your caption, just a few things here and there. It makes a big difference. They seem like small things, but they do make a big difference.
It does. Yeah, I've noticed, I had noticed you doing that, and I'm blanking on her name, which really sucks. But I had her as a guest on the podcast. She started recently doing it as well. So I think, to your point, yes, that's very valuable and important. I guess I want to spend kind of the last few minutes we have together just, I guess, talking about like what's your hope for becoming a part of kind of the crafting revolution squad and interacting on this platform.
Absolutely. Sorry, I muted myself while my dogs calmed themselves down. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm just excited because I feel like it's going to strengthen, what platform I already do have. And I've just admired the podcast, but been with it such time. It's really, again, it's like an honor. Somebody wants me to be on their podcast. Like, I still kind of feel that way about myself and doing that. So just me personally, I'm really excited to do that. growing up, I wanted to be a radio DJ. That was kind of my, like, that was what I wanted to be. So this is kind of a little bit of a fulfillment of that. For the project, though, specifically, I'm hoping that this will make content more accessible. I hope that this will hopefully make other guests, feel more comfortable coming on and doing an interview, giving them the option of doing kind of something not live, recorded at a pace, that feels a little bit more manageable for them. And also just my audience has, requested, like, you need to do a podcast, and I'm like, I want to, but like the thought of starting that on top of everything else, it wasn't feasible. So, and also, just bringing more opportunities to the people that have already, spent so much time and effort sharing their stories. It just seems like a natural fit. So I'm really excited. And also, again, just how diverse your audiences, your guests are, and have it being more about crafting as well. I love woodworking and always will, but yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, like you, I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier, the podcast has also been an evolution, starting as maker mom, really because I was finding myself as a mom of little ones and being like, okay, I see some other women in this space, but most of them are not parents. And it's like really hard comparing yourself to somebody who does not have little human beings to be responsible for, in just the sense of like, wow, how are they being able to crank out so much work and all of that kind of stuff. And so it started really because I felt like, well, if nothing else, it gives me an excuse to find community of other moms who are makers. So, it started from that, very much my own selfish need. And then it grew into the Wonder Women, because wanting to be able to bring in women who were not moms. And then really when it's like, okay, I'm starting to reach out and have more non-binary folks on, and the realization that that name, just wasn't fitting. And so changing that name with the help of others, of specifically, I'll call them out now, of Slightly Acute, when they were talking about potentially starting a zine right before Pen and Chisel came out. They were circulating about trying to start a zine to have more representation of voices in the space.
Who is this again?
They go by A, and it's Slightly Acute on
Slightly Acute
on Instagram. And so anyways, they had kicked around some ideas of the name for that before it hit pause, because Pen and Chisel came out and felt like that was a good place. So one of the names was Crafting a Revolution, and I just absolutely loved it and got their permission to use it for the name of the podcast, and took off with it and ran. And I just felt like it opened up in several ways of, really focusing on, to me, anybody who creates anything with their hands is a maker. And so, or craft, has a craft. So opening it up that way, and then not being as gender specific, though I'm still pretty firm about no men being on the podcast. I'm going to keep pretty firm on that one, I think. I'm like, there's like 15 other podcasts you can be a guest on. So we're going to probably keep that true to the mission. But yeah, it's been an evolution as I've grown as a person and learned and just understood more of the needs of, like you said, the community. I think that's really what has driven all of the changes. And I love the community that listens to the podcast, and gives feedback and suggests people to come on and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're right. I think it's kind of been the same thing with Women in Woodworking it's just shown that there are so many more diverse communities that we can reach that, identify with what we are doing and also need to see representation. I think it's just been really beautiful to see how this community has grown. And I'm so glad that ours are like intersecting and growing together, because I've just, you're right. I mean, there's just not been a space like this for people to be able to just like come on and be themselves. And I'm glad to have found out about that slightly acute. That was really, kind to say about Pen and Chisel, because I still feel like it's very much a work in progress, but it really is, again, something that's supposed to be for the community. And that's something that I think is, again, like a very natural fit for us to work together, is like, we're here because we want to do good work and have fun.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, I do have to add at the end, I mean, I think it's just, Katie's are meant to rule the world. And so we'll, take it one podcast episode at a time.
Yes. It's now the Katie and Katie show.
That's right.
Welcome.
That's right. And the proper way to spell Katie too. And that is a joking dig at some of the Katies I've had on that don't spell it properly. They spell it with a Y instead. Well, excellent. Well, I will say, Katie, welcome to the Crafting a Revolution family. And I'm excited to start being able to share episodes, where you've done the interviewing. So, yeah.
I'm excited. I'm already getting my list together. And again, thank you so much for extending the opportunity and the platform, and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. Again, that was Katie Thompson of Women of Woodworking. And I am excited, thrilled to have Katie kind of joining and making this a no longer one woman team, but two women team for making this podcast happen, and have her join on as a host. And I think you all will enjoy maybe getting a fresh new voice on the scene, though I know you can trust that Katie is still going to dive into a lot of the same issues that I dive into when I'm doing the interviews, and she's going to be bringing on amazing guests just like we've been having on. So I know it will get only better with bringing on Katie, so I'm really excited for it. I will include how you can follow along with Katie's projects, Women of Woodworking, and then also her online monthly journal of Pen and Chisel. I'll include the links to those in the show notes for today's episode. You can find those show notes by looking in the description on your podcast app where you're listening to this on, or if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can check out the description down below for that as well. And the last place you can go find that at is freemanfurnishings.com/podcast. You can find this episode as well as all the previous episodes over there. Don't forget to follow along with the podcast over on Instagram. That's just at Crafting a Revolution. And also, while you're at it, if you want to get your name added to the list of people we thank at the top of the episode for every episode, head on over to patreon.com/Crafting a Revolution and join the Pod Squad over there. Any tier level that you pick, you will get your name added to the list of thank yous. All right. So when I'm not interviewing amazing makers and making podcast episodes, you can find me designing and making and carving and dancing my way through the shop over at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across pretty much all of social media. I'm active on a daily basis over at Instagram. That again is just at Freeman Furnishings, and pretty close to daily over on TikTok. That as well is at Freeman Furnishings. So come on over, say hi. I'll say hi back, I promise. And it's the end of the week. I hope you all have a great weekend ahead of you. And as always, let's go craft a revolution. She, her, they got something they